Hello, everyone. Welcome to CPayant Payments Beyond Africa, the podcast where we talk about finance, we talk about payment in Africa, talk about global payment, and discuss with key opinion leaders and experts in the industry about the things affecting finance in Africa today, cross-border trade in Africa today, and finance across the globe. We learn from insights from these experts, and we also try to pick their brain about what they anticipate in the future. And so, if you are joining us for the first time, this is brought to you by CPayant, and CPayant is the neobank and cross-border payment platform that lets you send money instantly, cheaply, and securely across Africa. From any African country, you can pay like you are home, pay like you are local. And right now, you can also send and receive money from Europe and the USA with CPayant. So the guest we are having today is a very experienced and seasoned researcher, a data person, a man of numbers by every respect. He leads research and data at Intelpoint. Intelpoint is Techpoint Africa's market intelligence and research arm, where they help you make decisions through informed by data. So we are having him today to discuss a couple of interesting issues that you will learn about as time goes on. So wherever you are listening from, wherever you are watching from, make sure to give us subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on Twitter, and we are also on. You can also read, full on our blog or website. So thank you so much for joining. And if you are from Francophone Africa, bienvenue. It's the same podcast where we discuss as we've been having guests previously. So before we proceed further, because I'm super excited about this one, I would like to give the floor to our guest, Abiodun Adenle, to just give us a bit more about tell us a bit more about himself.
Yeah, thank you, Anderson. Thank you for the invite. I mean, so I would say the truth. I didn't really know about CPayant before the invite, but with my research, I can see that there's a lot of. I actually need to do some more research to know, if I could be of service to you guys, if Intelpoint could be of service to you guys too. Anyway, so yeah, so as you said, my name is Abiodun Adenle. I lead research and intelligence at Intelpoint. Intelpoint is the research and intelligence arm of Business Front Limited. So yeah, Techpoint Africa formerly, but dynamic changed some time ago. So it's now like Business Front, from Techpreneur Business Front. Yeah, Intelpoint has done a lot of research on fintech, insurance, the workplace culture, trade and finance in Africa, energy, energy in Nigeria's energy industry, and basically we've shared bits of data, bite-sized data finding, data research on our social media platforms for everybody. Basically, it's there for everybody to see. So, yeah, that's that about who I am and what I do.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. So you are welcome, Abiodun. It's such a pleasure to share the stage with you and have you, give us this time out of your very busy schedule to discuss issues with us today. So I will jump right straight to the questions, and the first, we are going to start with the evolving payment landscape in Africa. So a lot of people think it's mostly about payment right now, because when people hear tech startup at the moment in Africa, wherever it is in Africa, West, South Africa, it's mostly payment that comes to mind. So we are going to look at the evolving payment landscape. And there's one question we are curious about, and we want to know if people are actually becoming included financially, going by the data. And how have the adoption numbers changed? So we know it has to be a demand that is necessitating these platforms. So there are obviously opportunities that they are trying to capture. I've seen a couple of reports where you talked about how you can access, build a startup in Africa and set up, access the African market basically. So we want to know how what's changing in the numbers, and are the numbers actually changing in terms of financial inclusion, and what's driving these dynamics?
Okay, so I would say that in terms of financial inclusion, the numbers did change. I mean, from the last data I saw, the numbers did change. If you look at the World Bank Index database, you see that Nigeria's numbers actually went up from 45% to around 63%, in a couple of years, I think 4 or 5 years or so. So, I mean, 63% is not as is not what you term inclusive, right? But it's huge. It's more than half of the population. So that's good. So, but the thing is, the coverage is for that data in particular, when you're looking at how the data was gathered, and so with a sample of 1,000 population, and the sample is 1,000 out of 200 and something million, that's acceptable, right? You can use it to draw conclusions from your sample. But they did omit some. It's not like they omitted it. They didn't just go there. Some areas in Nigeria, those places that are tied to the Boko Haram insurgency, and they represent around 7% of the population. So that would most likely have affected that number. So that number is not something when we are looking at 63% inclusion. There's people that have account ownership, right? It should not, 63% might not be, I'm not saying it is not. I mean, that's a very extensive research, right? But we should look at it from that angle too. That, I mean, if you look at the northern part of the country, I would say that they are they are the most likely to be not included. I don't know if you get where I'm going. So it's more like 63% is conclusive, but we should look at it from that aspect. And from if you are looking at what is driving it, it's very obvious that technology is the major driving factor, because these days you really do not have to go into a bank to open an account, right? From the from the comfort of your business place, your homes. I mean, there was a time when banks were really going out for, to like open accounts for people. I remember sometime around 2018, 2019, that in a day, right, in my house back then, in a day, you might have about 4 or 5 banks come to meet you at home, telling you to open an account. That it doesn't take more than 5 minutes. You just need to take pictures, and then you have an account. So I would say that it is majorly technology, phones, how people now have phones, both featured phones and smartphones, right? So, but the problem I'm seeing is that um, I think that our account ownership number has to do with more of the feature phones, right? Because from the number I saw, Nigeria currently has about 27% of the population having smartphones. I mean, that number, depending on the source of your data, you might find a higher number, but generally speaking, it's basically below 50%, right? So I'm looking at it like it is coming more from the feature phone, which means people are just opening accounts and using USSD, just quickly transfer money with star 57 something and do something with your account, right? So yeah, and I think that's basically what is driving it. Then something around um, uh, I think why more people are not having to get smartphones, like the smartphone penetration is below 30 or let's say 40%, is that um, it's quite expensive for us in Nigeria or Africa, I would say, because so I mean people will prefer to buy second-hand phones than buying brand new phones because it is much cheaper, right? But how many people even still have the funds to like buy smartphones, right? Because most times an Apple phone would cost around say 150K upwards, right? In an economy where people do not really earn that much. So I think people would opt more for the featured phones, right? So another constraint is education. Even the Findex report found out that people that have uh, secondary education or more, tend to have more access to smartphones and even, have account ownership. So yeah, I think basically technology is the major driver, and inside technology there are some constraints that makes it not as easy to say that it is just um, phone ownership, because phone ownership has two different aspects to it: smartphones and featured phones. So yeah, so I mean smartphones also has something about it, right? So when you're using featured phone, you're limited to just some you are not limited to many products that any financial organization would offer, right? So that's something we need to look at too. You understand? So when you talk of inclusion, are you really talking about people just having accounts, or are you saying people using their accounts for something like FX transfers, credit, access to credit, international payments, insurance? Basically, I mean, some companies are actually trying to include people more using featured phones, but I've not seen much of that. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thank you so very much for that response. So it's mostly education and technology driving adoption, pushing the adoption
Yeah.
numbers. And it's not necessarily as astronomical as people imagine, but probably the education, the fact that people are getting more educated and people have a lot of smartphones and technology is going through smartphones. So a lot of people are latching onto this technology trend because they want to quickly and
Yes, but not exactly. But so it's that so technology is like the major factor, right? Education is basically more of saying that okay, when you have having a smartphone, people that have accounts, people that have accounts, financial service accounts, have they found out that more of them are educated. You get, so it's not like a um, correlation, right? It's more of a okay. Do they? We found out that more people that have accounts tend to have um, a higher education. So the major factor there is technology, smartphone ownership and penetration. That's it.
thank you so very much. You heard that right. So technology penetration and smartphone usage is driving the driving financial inclusion across Africa. Thank you so much for that response. So The next question is closely related. I think you already answered the question. So the key indicators responsible for changing financial inclusion numbers, and that's what you just answered. So I will move straight
Oh,
to the next part of the questions, and I think this is one a lot of persons, when you talk about data and research, it's sort of goes through our head, like you know numbers. A lot of people are not really friendly. They don't find numbers quite fun and interesting, especially when they were introduced to stuff like calculus and differentials in high school. So we want to talk about data and research. So AI is changing everything as we know it, from automated robots that could do literally everything to large language models that can predict text and write complete academic essays and research papers. We also have AI that can code, can do nearly everything. So and data seem to be the foundation of a lot of um, technology, like binary ones and zeros and stuff like that. So this is data being fed into the computer, and computer now able to act more intelligently uh, than they would without the data. So now we want to know, why do you think data is still relevant in today's AI-driven world, and do you think it would remain so? It will remain so in for the reasonable future.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I to answer the second question before I answer the first one, I think it's going to remain so like forever. Like as long as AI exists, there must be data. So the thing is that when you are looking at you cannot separate data from AI, because what AI is basically um, an algorithm, like a system that uses probabilities, right, which is already data, right, to like guess the most likely um, outcome, right, that they've already trained it to agree with. You understand? So without data, right, in fact, data is like 100% of what AI is. Sincerely, apart from the hardware, like data centers, which is data too, right? So you cannot, data will forever be, even without AI, right? Data is something that we didn't create as human beings, but we kind of have grown with our intellectual curiosity. We've grown to see that it is very necessary, right? Because before we even discovered how to analyze data and look at what data is, we're doing it subconsciously without knowing, what we're doing. It's you notice that it rains for the past 2 weeks. It has been raining constantly in the morning. I mean, you would assume that tomorrow morning it will rain, right? So that's you analyzing data, and that's you using data even without AI. Our ancestors have been doing that. So data would always be necessary, right? So in the AI space, right? When AI started, coming to the limelight, you would notice that um, so data would always be necessary. But to answer the first question, and I think we need to look at it from the perspective of how or why would data be necessary, or how do we make sure that data the data we feed, because these days, if you notice, some AI, I read a paper some days ago about how AI is now giving out, they called it something, I forgot it, but it's now giving out information that were wrong, right?
Hallucinate,
And
yes.
then, yeah, it's not really hallucination, but I understand what you're saying. So it's more like somebody fed it that data, and that data was very wrong, right? If not very wrong, wrong basically, right? But it has trained itself on wrong data over and over again, believed its own data over and over again. So now its data is now giving out information that initially it would not have given out if it was not fed that wrong data. So basically, I think we should talk about how data quality, you know, data when AI gives you a data, how do you verify? You need to verify. You need to be sure that yeah, this is true, right? So um, that I think that's where the question, and I think that's where we need to like focus more on as race generally, but in Africa in particular, we need to also focus on um, why we should pay attention to this data because if you look at Africa, much of our data is not really out there, right? The other day I sent out a FOI request for data to one of our agencies, and I mean they didn't even reply me, right? That's to tell you how unavailable much of our data is, right? So and although I know that if you ask AI for that data, it will tell you that oh I don't have it, there's no source online, you know. But what if somebody somewhere had fed it some wrong data about something that is not really available online. See how it's going to cause, problems for businesses and decision makers all around the world. So I think that's where we should be looking at it more from um, data quality, data governance, not really from the perspective of would data be useful. Data would always be around to always be useful to humans. In fact, whatever we want to do now and in the future and any wherever, maybe in heaven, data would always be useful. So that's I think that answers that question.
Thank you so much for that response. So it's more about data quality and data availability than it is about the relevance of data. So it's more about having data that makes more sense, that's more useful. And so it's going to be like super relevant as time. Data is going to be super relevant as time goes on. So thank you so much for that. So in case there is any confusion, because mostly about like AI, with AI doing a lot of stuff, so it's more about like people are looking at data. So I think the only point where confusion might come from this question should be maybe the career aspect of things where people are thinking, okay, like for example, getting this data, would AI be able to access like live data? And that also makes humans super relevant because at some point, but except in a completely automated society where AI has all the data points and is in control of it, that could be when maybe they can be totally responsible for uh, putting the data together. Or like you want to say something?
No, yeah, I heard you say live data, and I agree with what that point because yeah, I mean, so another thing is live data would tie to availability, right? So when you are talking of live data, you need to look at is the data available in the first place? Would people like I told you, I asked for data from one of our agencies and I didn't even get a reply, like not even an acknowledgement reply. Right. So I mean that's just me, but say an organization like UN reaches out to one of our agencies to request for data so that they can have live data to fit their AI system or something like that. I think maybe that's possible. So yeah, right.
And this is one of the reasons why Africa has to take documentation seriously, because I think we
Absolutely.
had this problem where we even had like our own history being written by people who are not Africans, and so a lot of things got distorted along the way. So it's still what might play out today if we don't brace up and stand up to what's ahead of us. So thank you so very much. I'll move on to the next question, and this is about research. When people hear the word research, it gets their head like spinning because like research, sometimes research it's far reaching. You have research in terms of finance, you have research in all fields, and it's somehow it seemed to be like the more you because research the more you talk about research, the more you get into a lot of complicated uh, stuff like that. So now I want it to come from this the perspective of how people should accept research, like how people should perceive research, and in order for the broader society to appreciate it. What should people keep in mind when we talk about research? For example, Intelpoint, for example, is providing research to help people make better decisions based on like what actually obtains from the daily activities and, and things going on in the economy. So, how do you think people should, what should people keep in mind so that they get to love and appreciate research, and how should they approach making use of this information to better their decision in your perspective?
Yeah, okay. That's a personal question because I'm all about research. So data is something that we basically cannot, like, as human beings, if you really want to make informed decisions, you need to make use of data, right? And how do you use data? You use data by analyzing, um, finding trends and patterns and outliers and trying to explain why and what is likely going to happen in the future, right? And another way we use data is to find out what is really going on in an ecosystem, like in a sample, a population, or whatnot. So when we are talking of research, right, the mistake people usually make is to see an headline number and assume that it is settled. That okay, once somebody says Africans earn 250% of something, 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 right? They'll be like, yeah, that's it, that's true. Yes, I understand how, like, we shouldn't really take researches as at face value. Yes, acknowledge what somebody has done, right? See, for example, I think Intelpoint we did the Nigerian Financial Services report, market report. I think in 2024, 2023, thereabout. So in the report, one of our major findings was that Nigerians earn only about 2 point something percent of Nigerians earn 200K and above or something like that. So that's so before we put that out there, we actually did research, right? We interviewed about, I think, 4,000 people, you know, um, did our analysis and came up with that number, right? So when you see that number online, you basically think, yes, I said it, this is this. That's not the first thing to do, right? Yes, you can just agree with it at first because that's somebody's work they've done scientifically, to tell you that this is what I found based on this research I did. But that's not enough because research should be replicated, right? You should be able to do it again, right, and come up with very little difference, like if not the same, but it's hardly the same. So we did another one, um, the access to finance in Nigeria, I think last year. And we found the same thing, basically, different population, we use different samples, different people answered our questionnaires, and we found out the same thing, right? I think the last one was 2.4. This one, that other one was 2.5. You can see the trend already that it's not really about what research says. We need to also look at it, check, is it replicated? Has somebody done this before? Are they similar? Are their findings similar, right? If there's differences, look at their methodology. How did they do this, right? It's not really more, it's not about, the headline number. It's more about what has this been supported before, right? If it has not been supported before, okay, I see you, and I hear you, I agree, but I would also wait for somebody to replicate this, or if I can replicate it myself and find out if what you're saying is, in tandem. So that if you look at when you do a research, right, and you found out that A equals B in Nigeria, if you check another person's research and you find out that B equals C, right? You need to find out why. Why is there a difference in their findings? You most likely notice that it's just basically because they use a different method, sample a different demography of people. It's not really a headline thing. We should be able to see. I mean, there was a research some time ago. They tried to replicate about 200 and something research claims. Like imagine people did a bunch of different kind of research, right, from social sciences, and there were claims from those research that um, um, North Korea has 5% population, something, something. These are different findings and claims. So a group of scientists came together to like try and replicate that research. And they found out that only about 50% of those papers replicated in full, like were actually correct again after doing it the second time. So that tells us something, right? So tells us that when you do a research, it's not you at least you have to acknowledge what somebody has done, right? Especially they did it in a very scientific way, and they followed all the scientific rules and whatnot. But you also have to look at, has it been replicated? What did other people find? That's how we come, because doing the whole population survey is expensive, time consuming, and all those other constraints. So when people do sample, I mean, we should see some similarities in their findings, right? The the more the variance in between their findings, the more you should be looking at why or is it what's why is it different? So a finding can be confirmed and still matter, right? Less than the headline make it sound. Before trusting any published finding, I would ask three things: has it been independently replicated? How big was the actual effect, right? Is there a difference? How big is the difference? And is it basically famous because the evidence is strong, or because it's a catchable, a catchy headline? So I think that's what people should notice, should take note of when they hear research. I mean, it's not really complex. It's just don't just trust what people say. You have to go further a little bit. Like when you see something online, you do go online and search and see what are other people saying about this. That's what I think people should um, take note of about research.
Thank you so very much for that. So, if
Yeah.
you are still watching Payment Beyond Africa, um, our guest here is the research lead at Intelpoint, and it's the podcast that talks about everything finance and cross-border payments in Africa. CPayant lets you send money across Africa like a local, instantly, cheaply, and securely. And right now, you can also receive money from the US and the EU and also send money as well. So the point there is that research is about validating the information you find. So you should take it with a pinch of salt and validate to make sure you have something concrete. So the next question will be about the Nigerian economy. And looking at the Nigerian economy, there are a lot of um, things have been playing out lately that have been piquing global investor interest as well as national investor interest. We have the Dangote refinery, the Dangote IPO. We also had banks like Zenith Bank achieving the best bank of the year, a feat that is not quite something a small one if you look at it, especially considering Nigeria, the situation of the country. And then we've also had investors who have invested in a First Bank receiving a high amount in dividend. And we've had the stakeholders from the NGX coming out to say about 900 or a couple of thousands of millionaires are being made annually from the Nigerian stock market. So, would you say Nigeria is on the path to industrialization?
Okay. So yeah, I can, you can say that, but I would lean towards we are like in a middle ground, right? So we're looking at industrialization. Industrialization has to do with something Nigeria is still struggling with, which, in my personal opinion, I I don't see it unless we fix something, and that thing is basically electricity, right? So yes, we you would say that it's improving, right? But as of the last data we have on Nigeria's electricity, access to electricity, you can obviously see that we have about 61% access. The urban area is more electrified than the rural. I think 85% to about, I think, is it 20 something percent for rural. So it's not, I don't think it's, see, we have a long way to go when it comes to industrialization. What we are seeing right here, in my opinion, is that a few big players, right, are pulling some huge strings, right? They are doing numbers because they have the scale and ability, right? Because like you can like when we are talking of a booming industry, right? We shouldn't just be talking about Dangote alone, you understand, or First Bank alone. We should be looking at how many of them are booming in that industry. You understand? Is it just two players, right? We should be hearing more names pop up. That's when I would, in my opinion, right? Yeah, somebody might argue that, the numbers are, people are investing more and, this, that. I mean, they're investing more in a couple of players, right? Um, um, if 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 you are going to say that uh Nigeria's population growing, you understand? For instance, this is an instance now. When you want to say that Nigeria's population is growing, you would need to look at, okay, in which demography, right? Is it the cities or in those rural areas, right? If it is the cities, you have a more, that's not, the population is growing, but I think this is where we need to focus on. It's not just the population is growing. So if you carry that same instance and apply it to the industries, we should be hearing of more people, more players, popping up, um, having numbers, huge numbers, and not just a couple of them. You understand? But for the banking sector, I would agree that yes, we are seeing a lot of changes and booming in that sector. Just, I mean, First Bank recently reached about 6 trillion market cap. First to do it in that space. That's like that's like that's something to like because market cap is basically a huge signal. You understand? And I think basically it's because it's the banking sector. Everybody is banking. Like if even if they are not included, they're basically money is money. Everybody's using money. So I mean, with people transacting more and doing other activities in the economy, I mean, it's bound to happen like that. And I mean, the companies are also doing their part, trying to make sure that they grow. I mean, with CBN's recapitalization exercise recently, which they concluded in March 2026, would basically put them in an ownership consolidation position where they must need to strategize, scale, acquire, merge, and expand their reach. So I think in the banking sector, I can agree that yes, we are going to be seeing a lot of activity. But I don't think it's going to be explosive. But yes, it's going to be huge actually from what I'm seeing.
Thank you so very much for that response. And you can see how careful he is with numbers here. So we don't have to blow things out of proportion by any means. Our data man here is telling us that we have to be careful when we talk about, about numbers. So thank you so very much. It has been such a pleasure discussing these interesting questions with you. And to our audience, it's still Payments Beyond Africa. We'll be bringing on interesting guests like a guest we had here today, and would be enlightening you about things going on in Africa and across the globe when it comes to payment, when it comes to cross-border trade. So thank you so very much for giving us your attention. And it's again CPayant, your number one app for sending money across Africa, wherever you are in Africa. CPayant lets you send money instantly, securely, and affordably. And with CPayant, you can also get trade credit. You can send invoices that will be paid anywhere in Africa. And right now, you can receive money and send money to the UK and the EU, with other countries coming up soon. Si vous êtes français, vous pouvez abonnez-nous et suivez notre chaîne, partagez sur Facebook, partagez sur Instagram, partagez sur X. So, merci beaucoup de vous donner ton attention aujourd'hui. So, thank you so much. And until we come back again with another interesting episode of Payments Beyond Africa, that will be all for now. So, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, Abiodun.
Thank you. Thank you, Anderson. You too. You're welcome. Bye.